Good morning. Today is Monday, October 1st, 2012. My name is Mr. Ayre. This presentation will demonstrate what it would be like for students learning in a virtual classroom or viewing this vodcast as a playback link at their convenience. This performance-based project is made up of a math unit broken down into 3 mini-lessons consisting of graphs, ordered pairs, and mean, median, mode, and range. For my performance-based project, I have chosen to encompass Madeline Hunter's instructional theory into practice model. Through this lesson, I will be integrating the following strategies, such as identifying similarities and differences, reinforcing effort and providing recognition, note-taking, cooperative learning, cues and questions, and teaching specific types of knowledge with multiple exposure of key details. By the end of the lesson, the students will be able to identify the different types of graphs used in solving mathematical problems. They will be able to plot ordered pairs on a coordinate plane. And lastly, students will be able to understand, define, and distinguish the difference between mean, median, mode, and range. Before introducing the first lesson, I would ask students to recall their prior knowledge of graphs. What types of graphs are used in solving mathematical problems? Why are graphs so important? After listening to students' responses, I would then introduce the lesson by stating graphs are used to solve problems and display data. And in this instance, we'll start with the bar graph. This graph is used to display data on information collected. And in this instance, we have favorite sports. We see favorite sports listed below and the number of students who like the sports listed on the side. After reviewing this bar graph, the students would easily be able to identify how many girls like certain sports and how many boys like certain sports. Another type of popular graph is a line graph, represented here. The title of this is Bear Population in Emerald Forest. And by looking at the line here and the steady increase each year, with the exception of 2004 to 2005, students will clearly be able to see the rise in population of bears throughout the decade of 2000. Another important chart that displays data is a pie chart, as listed here. Students will be able to identify the shaded areas that make up a student's overall grade. Once students are comfortable and familiar with all the different types of graphs and why they're important, I would then transition to the topic of ordered pairs. So what are ordered pairs? What make up an ordered pair? Well, this lesson will answer all of these questions. We'll start with X. A coordinate grid has two perpendicular lines or axes labeled like number lines. The x-axis is located on the horizontal axis. This right here is the horizontal axis, or the x-line. The y-axis, shown here, is the vertical line on a coordinate grid. The point where the x-axis intersects the y-axis is called the origin. So how do we graph ordered pairs? Well, as we mentioned before, we have the x-axis and the y-axis. This is an example of an ordered pair. The x-coordinate is listed first, followed by the y-coordinate. The order in which you write the ordered pair is really important. The x-coordinate must come first. This shows how far over to the right or left you have to move on the x-axis. In the example, you can see a move of 2 to the right. The y-coordinate comes next. This number shows how far up or down you have to move on the y-axis. You move straight up or down from the x-axis point that you found first. And we can see here in this example of the ordered pair of 2 and 5, we must move 2 spaces to the right and 5 spaces up, plotting our point at 2 and 5. Now it's students' turn to plot points and label them on a coordinate plane. Another example here shows the ordered pair of 6 and 4. Students will know to go over 6 spaces to the right, representing the x, and 4 spaces up from that point, representing the y. indicating the ordered pair of 6 and 4 labeled by A on this coordinate plane. Now it would be students' turn to participate and interact a little bit with the whiteboard. The following red dots would be placed over on the side, and each student would be called on to place the dot on the proper position based on the examples listed here. For example, the first ordered pair of 9 and 4, the student would take the red dot listed here on the side and properly place it on the coordinate plane at point 9 and 4. And the same thing would follow suit for the rest of the ordered pairs here. This gives students a way to interact and play around a little bit, familiarizing themselves with how to plot points on a coordinate plane. They would next be able to name the ordered pair after already being labeled on the coordinate plane. For example, calling on a student to give me the ordered pair of point R. The student would be able to come down here and look at point R and realize the X must be represented by 0 because it moves over 0 spaces left or right. The Y point must be represented by a 1 because it moves up 1. So the student would then come up here and have a chance to write on the whiteboard 0 and 1 represented by the R dot. And so on and so forth. The same would follow suit for the rest of the plots on the coordinate plane. I would then transition over into mean, median, mode, and range. So what does mean mean? Another name for mean is average. To find the mean, you add all the numbers together in a given set, then divide the answer by the amount of numbers. Next, we would look at median. The median is the middle number when numbers are arranged in order. If there are 2 numbers in the middle, the median of the average is 2. A little tip to remember is you count over to the middle. If there are 2 numbers in the middle, add them and divide by 2. The trick here is that MED, med, or mead, sounds like middle, so you can remember that it's the middle number. Our next key term and definition here is mode. Mode is the number or numbers that occur most often in a set of numbers. The mode is the number that you see more than any other number. And finally, we have range. Range is the difference between the highest and lowest numbers in a given set of numbers. You subtract the lowest number from the biggest number, and that's how you get your range. So let's try some together. We have a given set of numbers here. We want to find the mean. If we remember correctly, the mean is also known as the average. So what do we do here? We take all our given set of numbers and add them together and divide by how many numbers there are listed. And in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So once we add these up, we divide by 9, and that gives us our total of 15. So in this instance, the mean or average of this given set of numbers is 15. So let's find the median now. And if we remember and look back at our definitions that we wrote down, the median is the middle value. So first, the best thing to do is rewrite the list in order. So I'll take that given set of numbers and write them in correct numerical order. And I find that 14 is the middle number, or median. And remember, the formula for the place to find the median is the number of data points plus 1 divided by 2. Now, you don't have to use this formula. You can just count in from both ends of the list until you meet in the middle if you prefer. Either way will work and is acceptable. Now, how do we find the mode? Well, if we remember back to our key terms and definitions, the mode is the number that is represented more often than any other. And by looking at this set of numbers, we can clearly see that 13 appears more often than any other number. So our mode simply is 13. Lastly, to find the range, we know that we must take the highest number and subtract the lowest number. The range is known as the difference between the highest and lowest numbers in our set. So the largest value in this instance was 21, and the smallest value was 13. So we take 21 minus 13 and we get a range of 8. So then, to encourage higher levels of thinking, how about we find mean, median, mode, and range for the following list of values? We have 1, 2, 4, and 7. First, let's look at the mean. Again, we know mean means average. So we'll add the numbers up. 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 7. So 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 4 is 7, plus another 7, we get 7. Now that we have our total, we must divide by how many numbers there are. And in this instance, there's 4. So 14 divided by 4 gives us a mean or average of 3.5 or 3.5. Next, we must find the middle number or the median. And this one's a bit tricky. But if we notice, there really is no middle number because we have an even amount. So what do? Well, in this example, the numbers are already listed in numerical order. So we don't have to rewrite the list. But again, there's no middle number because there are an even amount of numbers. So in this case, the median is the usual average of the middle two values. Well, the middle two values here are 2 and 4. Now we'll add those two together and divide by 2. Just like we did up here, the same process we used to find the mean. 2 plus 4 is 6, divided by two numbers gives us a median of 3. So that's how we find the median in a set of numbers where there is technically no middle number. Now, the mode is the number that is repeated most often. But what do we do if all numbers appear only once, such as this case? Well, then there is simply no mode. And lastly, to find the range, we can see in this set of numbers that 7 is our highest value, and the smallest value is 1. So the difference is 6, because 7 minus 1 gives us 6. So our range is 6. After concluding the lesson, I would then introduce some cool resources for students to check out on their own time, consisting of games and further information to practice. If there are no more further questions and the students understand everything taught today in this whole math unit, I would then simply introduce the homework. Students will be given a fact sheet or tip sheet consisting of everything we talked about today, mainly with mean, median, mode, and range, since there are key terms and definitions and formulas on here. And after becoming familiar on that, they would then submit to me the following homework: finding the mean, median, mode, and range. This activity relates to sports and something students can generally relate to in the real world, making it more interesting. If there are no further questions, the lesson is finished. The learning strategies utilized are identifying similarities and differences, mainly in the introduction of different types of graphs and charts. Students could clearly identify the similarities in that all charts and graphs display information. They could also identify differences in the way data is displayed throughout the different types of graphs. The strategy reinforcing effort and providing recognition was used throughout the entire lesson as students participated in each portion of the lesson. Students were given examples that explained each topic to reinforce the concepts. Students recognized how each example was relevant to the topics covered. Students were also recognized for their efforts and participation through positive reinforcement, praise, and constructive feedback. Note-taking was mainly used in the mean, median, mode, and range part. They were able to write down key terms and definitions to use later on for their own benefit. Cooperative learning was evident and used throughout the entire lesson. Students were able to use social interaction that positively assisted one another, and encouragement and participation of the material was also evident. They are learning as a group. The students engaged in reciprocal teaching as they found the information individually and then shared this information within the group when asked to do so. And lastly, cues and questions and teaching specific knowledge and multiple exposure of key details were also apparent throughout the entire lesson as a whole. This concludes the performance-based project.